What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we have the man who helped bring college wrestling to UFC FIght Pass. Wanted to have him on the show to talk about what they got coming up for the rest of the season. If you guys like this episode, please consider clicking subscribe. If not, we'll see you guys next time. Oh, and this video is brought to you by Barbarian Apparel. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to a very special episode. As you guys see, I'm in my house today. We're not at the studio, but that's because we have a special guest on the show today. I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'm sure you guys see the title by now, and you guys kind of get a clue. You got a clue of what we're going to talk about and who this is, but I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself. I'll go ahead and say his name. His name is Rob Haydak. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you having me. I'm the president of CFFC Match Day, also the president of Cage Fury Fighting Championships as well.
Okay, and so what's your role in this whole, it's new to the sport of wrestling to see college wrestling on UFC FIght Pass. For years, we've seen it on different platforms, and it's usually a lot of the same players year in and year out for the fans, but I think the wrestling community was maybe surprised a little bit when they saw that UFC FIght Pass was going to get involved in Cage Fury. So kind of explain your role amongst all the players in this game.
Sure. So I've been partners with the UFC now for, I think we're going on our 5th year. Last year has presented an opportunity to go out to Fort Bragg and produce a college wrestling match with Campbell University. As someone who's wrestled their entire life since he was 7 years old, I mean, I was all over the opportunity, and the event went very well. And we had many discussions during the off season, and we decided to launch CFFC Match Day this past season that we're still in as well. And we're excited. We think it's a huge opportunity. It's very complimentary. When you look at wrestling, especially in the UFC, it's the dominant discipline. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
What do you think took so long, I guess, to get the two sports kind of married together in something like this?
I really think it's the leadership at UFC FIght Pass. I think there's some very passionate people there. You have Steve Tecci, who's heading up UFC FIght Pass, and then you have Walker, who understands the sport. And I think I was a good fit because of my wrestling background, because I've produced events before in not only MMA, but also in professional grappling. And again, I think we're all looking at this as an opportunity to put these elite athletes on a platform and produce it at the highest quality.
Has there been anything that has surprised you by the wrestling community, or I guess the wrestlers? You're about halfway through now, so I'm sure you got kind of an idea of what the community responds to, what they like, what they don't like. Has anything surprised you so far?
Not really. Again, I've been around the sport for a number of years. So when you look at the athletes, you know the dedication and the commitment that they put behind themselves and their teams to be at the level they are, Division I. And then you look at all the coaches. I mean, these are all former wrestlers, so they understand the grind. And if anything surprised me to this point, I would say it's how well we've been received by the different programs, appreciating what we're doing. We're looking to be complimentary in the space. And by that, what I mean is, we're not looking to compete with anyone. There's a lot of decent platforms out there. We have a different vision, and we want to produce it at the highest level. And so for me, it's been how well we've been received by the coaches and the athletes themselves.
And what is that vision for college wrestling?
The vision is very similar to college game day for football, right? They travel around the country. They visit different universities. There's a lot of energy. It's sort of the big games of the week. There's a lot of hype behind it. To this point, I don't think college wrestling has been put up on that pedestal. And I think there's an opportunity to do that. Again, it's because a lot of people see the value of wrestling when you get to the UFC. They understand that discipline, again, my opinion, but far superior than any other discipline. So I think people are starting to appreciate these athletes. And if we can open that up to a broader audience, such as UFC, I think that's a benefit for everyone involved.
Do you think that there's any parallels between wrestling and jiu-jitsu where, wrestling's been around for I believe much longer than BJJ has, but the trajectory that they've taken since, I don't know, the past a couple decades, and just kind of seeing them, seems like they've surpassed wrestling at this point. Do you see any parallels kind of between the two, or do you see wrestling at a certain point right now that BJJ was maybe a few years ago?
No, I mean, that's a great question. Again, for someone who has seen a lot of grappling and a lot of wrestling, top control, hip pressure, leverage. I think there's a lot of similarities. I think world-class jiu-jitsu guys will tell you the least person they want to compete against is probably a high-level Division I wrestler because of their hips, their leverage, and their ability to control, especially on the ground. So, I think there's a respect factor from BJJ practitioners when they look at elite wrestlers and vice versa. I've seen high-level wrestlers come into a room against, blue belts and purple belts in BJJ and just look, what the heck was that? So again, I think there's a mutual respect, and I think they're definitely complementary.
What got you into the fight game?
Back in 2009, I was running a bunch of different businesses. I helped a family purchase a casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And after that acquisition, they offered me a job. I declined it, but I said I might want to put on some fights, and I looked at it as a hobby. This coming Friday, I'll be putting on my 128th event. So that hobby turned into a full-time passion. I will tell you, when it comes to wrestling, I am as passionate, if not more.
And when it comes to putting on these events, I'm sure there's some crazy stories. Obviously, what can go wrong will go wrong. I'm assuming it goes that way sometimes. And I did a little research going into this interview, and I found out that the first battle at the Bragg was definitely one of those moments where when something can go wrong, it will go wrong. Can you kind of let the audience in on the story of how that almost didn't happen?
Yeah, so, I have this thing where I say the promotion business is sort of like shit happens. No matter how well you prepare for things, something always happens. You bring up Fort Bragg. So last year we had an MMA event on a Thursday night in Tampa, Florida. And then a nor'easter decided to blow in on Friday morning. We were very concerned that we were even going to be able to make it there in the weather. That was definitely a challenge in itself. We landed, we got into the hangar, the event was going absolutely flawless. And then again, the nor'easter kicked up and it literally rained on the mat with a side wind coming through. At the time, I think my heart was beating out of my chest because that was the first time we were producing on UFC FIght Pass. It seemed like it took an hour and a half before they closed the hangar doors, but in reality, it was probably less than 10 minutes. And when you look back at it now, I think it actually added a lot of value to the event and showed how we could adapt under some crazy circumstances.
Yeah, I think that stuff happens a lot in college wrestling, where it's something where there's got to be a delay because of technical difficulties or for whatever reasons. But another thing that I want to bring up was you guys had a pretty big viral moment earlier this season with the Campbell duel in Wyoming, and I'd heard about those plans for a while now, but I didn't really think a whole lot of it because you hear about sometimes they have these dual meets in these wild places, but it seems like the internet really took a liking to that. Can you kind of walk us through how that event came to end up being in a barn? You had what, 2 Division I teams wrestling in a barn? I mean, that story writes itself.
Yeah, the credit really goes to both coaches involved in that. It was their vision, and we were all over it. I like to tell people all the time, and I think this is our secret sauce when it comes to MMA as well as college wrestling. We're not producing a wrestling match. We're producing an event. And I think, in order to grow the sport, you need to bring on casual fans, right? The diehards are going to tune in, whether you're wrestling in a gymnasium, in a barn, that's going to happen. But to pique people's interest and hear that a wrestling match is taking place on a private ranch, 4,000 acres on inside this little red barn was pretty special. The coaches embraced it, the wrestlers embraced it, and it was I mean, I can't say enough. It was fantastic, and I hope we go back again next year.
And you guys have a pretty good relationship so far with Campbell. You guys, obviously, they kicked it off for you guys last season, and now you're going to be there a couple more times. They have something coming up. Is that correct?
Yeah, they have a quad match coming up on the 19th. It's North Dakota State, Stanford, and Purdue coming into Campbell. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And just to talk about Campbell, I mean, Scotty Sentez, coach, has really been instrumental in driving this thing, especially early on. He's the pioneer guy. We're extremely loyal to him, and we think he has a tremendous program on the rise. So we're excited to see where that ends up in the years to come.
Was that kind of a goal for you guys to work with the programs like Campbell's? Most people would think Big 10, Big 12, but obviously, you guys have worked a lot with some smaller schools and bigger schools as well. But was that kind of a point of emphasis for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, to be realistic, we didn't get the green light to do this until probably about a month before the season actually started. And to understand college wrestling, their schedules are made well in advance. So, I have the luxury of having Rob Eider as a partner in CFFC Match Day. Rob's a former wrestling coach, University of Penn, former Olympian. So he had a lot of relationships with coaches around the country. So he was able to call. And you also have to respect the fact that a lot of these programs already have network deals, already have production deals and media rights deals, whether it's Flow or the network themselves. So we were fortunate to really kind of put this type of schedule together. So again, I think for the future, when we can have much more time to plan this, we're going to have an array of programs throughout the nation. That's our goal.
Have you guys already saw some feedback from some coaches that are like, man, we missed out. Like, why didn't we get to perform? Because I think people are paying attention to not only, the cool venues or whatever, but the competition's great. But I said this on our show the other day, is it almost feels like it's its own event, like you're saying, whether that's the storyline from the wrestling or whatever, but just the fact that you guys are able to really conquer it from a social media standpoint and really use your platform to really promote these things, where sometimes these dual meets are on ESPN Plus and you don't see any sort of lead up into it. You're not seeing any articles kind of highlighting these guys, and they wonder why college wrestling really hasn't taken a liking to when it gets on those bigger networks. And to me, I think it's just because they're not really promoting it. So are you guys seeing coaches that are like, man, we would like that shine for our program as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think early on, there was a few programs that were apprehensive, not quite understanding what the correlation was with us, who is CFFC. You guys are MMA people. What are you doing in wrestling? Not understanding my background, understanding Rob Eider's background, and our whole team for that matter. We have several people on our production team that have wrestling backgrounds. I think our play on social media, I think the force behind the UFC, I think we're getting that visibility that's really piquing the interest of a lot of programs. And we have been in contact with some programs that are seeing what we're doing and like what we're doing. And one of the key things, too, is bringing credibility to what we're doing. It's great to have the UFC platform, but to have folks on our commentary team like a Shane Sparks, a David Taylor, Kyle Dake, Jim Gibbons, the list goes on and on. Again, I think that brings credibility to what we're doing, and even getting their feedback saying, hey, this is really cool what you guys are doing, tells me we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, whose idea was it to bring on guys like, David Taylor and Kyle Dake and Jordan Burroughs? Whose idea was that?
I think it's really from roundtable discussions with the UFC. I know Jordan personally, just from wrestling here in South Jersey. But the UFC was instrumental in saying, hey, let's get some folks that resonate throughout the wrestling community. Shane Sparks was the first one to come on board and just has really been dynamite. And the fact that, he brings a certain level of energy every time he shows up. He's passionate about the sport. He likes what we're doing. And, he's been instrumental in saying, hey, why don't we, take a look at the Kyle Dakes of the world, David Taylors, and see who we can get. I was just speaking a few minutes ago to Joey McKenna, who will be out at our Campbell duel. He wrestled obviously at Stanford before, so to have him on the broadcast team is going to be pretty exciting.
Do you guys have any future plans for freestyle events or anything like that, or right now just focusing on college wrestling?
Yeah, I think the focus right now is college wrestling. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew. I think we need to continue to earn our respect in that space. I think we're going to get there. One of the things that's absolutely instrumental is making sure that we produce these events with the proper graphics, writing time, all that stuff that's necessary for, especially the diehards who watch wrestling, myself included. I want to see writing time. You watch a lot of these other platforms out there. There's some struggles with that. So that's very important for us. We ordered our own clock system, our own Daktronics. We've elevated our graphics package, and we're going to launch that at the Campbell Duel. And I think people are going to see a lot more consistency coming from our end as far as production value.
Is that one of the opportunities that you guys feel like you saw that you could kind of differentiate yourself? Because a lot of people are going to be like, well, what makes you different than the other subscriptions that I have? Is that kind of something that you feel like you can separate yourself with?
It has to be, especially being the new players in the space. And it's not to knock anybody else. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to producing. When you go to these different venues, depending on what the universities have as far as a scoring system, clock system, there's challenges to that. I think even recently you saw an ESPN broadcast of two of the top programs, and they had their struggles. So we respect that. We just want to try to eliminate those situations as much as possible, and I think we're on to something.
Right on. I like hearing that. I think a lot of people listening to this will like hearing that, because this is, again, something that's been, had to deal with in the past, and no fault of anybody's, I guess. But looking forward to the end of the season, what should people be looking forward to tuning in on Fight Pass for?
Looking forward to the rest of this year. We have December 19th. We have the quad down at Campbell. As I mentioned earlier, North Dakota State University, Stanford, as well as Purdue. And then we're excited on December 21st. We're heading to St. Louis for Mizzou versus Illinois. That should be an exciting matchup. And then going into next year, we're headed to Las Vegas on January the 13th. And then in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is our home base at the Hard Rock Casino, we're going to host West Virginia versus Columbia on January the 7th. So, and then we wrap up the year again with Campbell and Appalachian State, who have a pretty good rivalry there. And then we're going to get geared up for the Nationals, go out there, hopefully speak to a bunch of programs, bunch of coaches, and then get ready for next season.
Right on. If anybody wants to support the movement here with Cage Fury and college wrestling, how can they do that?
Just tune in, man. Follow us on CFFC Match Day on our social channels, and then tune in to UFC Fight Pass, see what we're doing. We're open to suggestions. We're open to criticism. It's the only way we're going to grow is to get people who watch the sport and comment on what they like and don't like. And then we're going to take that information and continue to try to make the product better and better year after year.
Right on, Rob. Well, I appreciate you jumping on here and doing this show with us. We always like having special guests on, especially people that support the wrestling community. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, we're just very thankful for the coaches that made the leap of faith to allow us to produce our events this year. Hopefully we honored our commitment, and we look forward to working with them in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Guys, if you like this video, please click subscribe, comment down below any suggestions you have for the Cage Fury team. Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.